We're delighted to have you here, guys. This is a first feature as a writer-director for you, Kate, and Deirdre, it's your first as a producer, and I think it's an incredible achievement, not just as a first feature, but as a genre film in general. There's a real sense watching it that there's a love of genre in it, I would say. So Kate, maybe before we get into, I suppose, the writing of You Are Not My Mother, could you tell me a little bit about your interest in genre films? People may have seen your short film Catcalls, which is fantastic, I think, short film. So is it something you've always had a love of? Did you always want to do like a genre piece as your first feature?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm a kind of a horror fan through and through, ever since I was kind of as far back as I can remember. Kind of had my mother harassed, trying to get her to let me watch all kinds of films that weren't suitable for me at the time. And reading a lot of Stephen King and Goosebumps and all that kind of stuff. It was kind of just surrounding myself with as much of it as I could get. So yeah, I've always loved the horror genre, and I think, it was always something that I wanted to pursue as a filmmaker. I think maybe back when I was in college, the genre wasn't as seen as prestige, so you were kind of told to go more in the drama direction. But I couldn't deny it was my path, and I knew it. So I kind of, when I made Catcalls, that was kind of my first horror short that I did, but it felt very comfortable and at home to make that. And then so then very lucky to then get to make a horror feature as my debut. And my little baby Kate would be very pleased to hear that. I'm sure.
That's wonderful. And Deirdre, similarly for you, you've got a good background with fantastic films and working on I think pretty much most of the significant Irish horror films over the last 10 or so years. Is that something you always had an interest in as well, kind of starting off?
Yeah, absolutely. The same kind of with Kate, it was a very niche area to work in, with fantastic films with my colleagues, Brendan McCarthy and John McDonald. They set it up back in, God, I think it's around 2002 now, with a focus specifically on genre. But back then it was very niche, it was very specific, and probably sometimes not quite as potentially out, break out and kind of with strong characters. It might be a little bit more tropey. But we've seen now more than ever that it's become a genre that can really, intrigue and challenge, but also excite. And kind of, I always like to think that it kind of holds a mirror up to society, but without judgment. So it can kind of make quite challenging questions, bring quite challenging questions to us, but still do it under the umbrella of kind of fun and entertainment and a nice little scare along the way. So
I think that's a great explanation of horror, particularly good horror, that it can be about something else as well, and just makes you think. Catcalls and this, I suppose, as well, are really good genre pieces, but they're about something that's kind of relevant as well. Just before we get into that, Carolyn and Hazel, are you guys horror fans? Like, is it something you'd watch yourselves, or is it something you'd find difficult to watch? Hazel?
I used to be a massive horror fan. I think when I was reading the script of this, I was just like foaming at the mouth. I was like, this is the dream part. And recently, I think probably because of COVID, I've kind of slipped into like a bit of a more comfort film type person. But horror is definitely still really, really close to my heart.
Brilliant. And I understand that I've basically been watching The US Office on repeat for about 2.5 years.
Yeah, me too. Exactly.
And Carolyn, yourself, how are you with the horror genre in general?
Yeah, I'm, just on what Kate just reminded me there, I've read probably every Stephen King book as a kid, probably a bit prematurely. I was probably too young to read them, but I would find them in the library back when we went to libraries, and I read all of them. And the R.L. Stein had a thread of kind of horror books as well, and absolutely loved psychological horror. So yeah, when this came along, yeah, it ticked a lot of boxes, didn't it?
Brilliant. I mean, you can really tell watching it that there's a love of the genre through and through in it. Kate, just to go back to you on that, there's a terrific mix of, I suppose, Irish folklore, folk horror, kind of suburban folk horror, if that's a thing, and like a lot of Irish myths. Like the Changeling is quite prominent in it, but also I think there's a few little references to the puka with the black horse, unless I'm over reading that. But what I love about the film is that it plays incredibly well and scarily without any of the kind of supernatural elements, just with the story of a young girl, you know, worrying about, you know, her mother not being able to help her, or her mother's changed. And it reminded me a bit of the concept of Wendigo psychosis or something, that people, you have these supernatural myths and legends and then people can think that that's actually happening. And there's a really rich kind of melange in this film of all those different things. And I'm just wondering where it came from. Did it come from one source, or what was your starting point?
Yeah, well, I suppose I've found, like, you know, as a love, like, you know, with a love of horror, I think reading any kind of folk tales or folklore, you know, from, you know, Irish folk history, it's just, it kind of, what intrigued me the most about hearing those stories was the actual kind of real life impact of the folk story. So, like, you know, for example, Bridget Cleary, the story of her in like 1895, and her husband burned her in a fire in their house because he thought that she was a changeling. And it was those kind of stories that it was like the real life impact on families that believed that these stories were real. And, you know, people with mental illness, or even people who, you know, strong women who were seen as independent, were often kind of met a tragic end because people felt like there must be something supernatural at play. And so that really intrigued me as a kind of jumping off point. But then also, you know, just the idea, I wanted to write something as well about kind of, you know, whenever I'm writing anything, particularly the horror projects I've been working on, it always comes from very innate, like, primal fears that I have myself, because I feel like if I'm not afraid of this, what, like, who else is going to be? So, you know, the kind of more family drama aspect of the film comes from, you know, a personal place of, you know, somebody you love who is suffering, you know, with mental illness or physical illness, or, you know, I spoke to a lot of people who had that experience, like a parent who is kind of not mentally there for you growing up. And that story, I felt like when I was reading more of the folklore and folk tales and the impact of them, and then also I wanted to kind of explore these themes of like coming of age when like you haven't got a support system there, and the person you love the most is kind of not present, or even like they're kind of frightening to you. They just felt like they worked together, and then the two things kind of just started to meld together. And then obviously the more kind of research I did into Irish folk history was, you know, the more kind of things got developed within the script, like as you say, like the black horse, and like just kind of little nods to characters of folk history, or like kind of these different myths and legends, and, you know, details like that. So it then just started to kind of became this big kind of tapestry of all these things that I wanted to look at and include. And yeah, so then it all kind of came together.
Sorry, I was muted. Just like that, it just came together without any. There's also, you mentioned there, looking back at kind of Irish folklore and stuff, between Hazel, Carolyn, and then Ingrid Craigie's grandmother, Rita. There's a lovely kind of the three kind of women, which is a big thing in Irish mythology as well. Like I think the Morrigan is kind of three aspects, or there's a triptych involved. Was that something you were conscious of in kind of putting it together, or was that?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like I think the kind of, it's the three, I always forget now. It's like basically there's like the young woman, and then there's like this middle woman, and then there's the like hag, or the older woman, and they all kind of represent different aspects. And I find that really like a nice, like, you know, within paganism and even witchcraft, there was like this idea of, you know, this triptych of women. And like I myself, like I grew up with my mom and my granny, so we lived in my granny's house. So I always had this tradition of like a lot of strong women being around me all the time, and we kind of always joked that there was like a kind of a, you know, they were witches and all that kind of stuff, because it just like comes about. But then, like, you know, what if your granny actually is a kind of a witch, you know what I mean? It's so it's just like playing around with those ideas. Yeah, but everything, yeah, it's all very much like linked to things that I had read or researched as I was writing the script.
That's really cool. I'm going to come to the cast in a second, but I just want to talk a little bit about how this is developed through the Screen Ireland POV initiative, which looks to foster distinct Irish female voices in film. I just want to talk that a bit, but Deirdre first, how did the script come your way, and how did you get involved?
Yeah, so myself and Kate actually met a couple of years before they announced the POV scheme. So we had been talking as two women kind of working in the genre space. We made a beeline for each other to kind of look about working together. So when the scheme came up, we were immediately kind of, we got to give this a shot. So I think Kate kind of had a few ideas, and they came back and forth, and we kind of discussed the direction and what would work best for the scheme, bearing in mind that it is, you know, there is parameters in terms of the budget. So we kind of spent a bit of time doing that. And then the application form, I think, was a treatment. So we got a treatment into them. And then we found out, oh God, it's back in 2018, 19 now, that we were successful for development. So at that stage, then we went to a first draft. And I think they reduced it down to a certain amount of projects to go to first draft. And then from that, we then provided that a little bit more kind of lookbooks and designs of how we kind of envisaged kind of how we might make it. And then we were really fortunate. There was 4 projects then that were supported, and that was, we were all announced, I think, in May at Cannes 2019, just before the last couple of years took place. So
I was going to use that phrase before the last couple of years took place.
Yes, block it out.
And then, like, okay, so you went through your development process with the Screen Ireland and stuff, but you also, like, at that point, you assembled a brilliant cast. Like, it truly, like, so much of the heavy lifting on screen is done by 2 of the actors we have here. How did you go about casting the film? Did you, Kate and Deirdre, did you have ideas of who'd be perfect for Shar and Angela and Rita, I suppose, starting off, or was there a process?
Absolutely. Kate, you go with that.
Yeah, well, I'd seen Hazel because the protagonist in You're Not My Mother, Shar, is very kind of an internal person. So it was important that whoever was going to play that role could, you know, just give so much with a look, because she actually doesn't have a lot of dialogue in the film, but you have to kind of feel her emotional journey throughout it. And then I saw Hazel in a short film called Cuteness, which was just like this beautiful short, and her performance was just like so understated but said so much with just like very little dialogue. And I just thought, like, that's who should be Shar, definitely. So I think Hazel was kind of the first person we cast, and then I suppose it was just kind of, because obviously the whole movie hangs on Hazel throughout, and just like then all the other casts were kind of cast from Hazel, basically, because we needed like a family unit who all looked and felt like they were a family. And so it was kind of, that casting process took a while just to find the right combination of people. But yeah, it was a great experience. It was great fun. And then, yeah, Carolyn, I got sent some self-tapes, and Carolyn's self-tape was just like, it was really funny because we got sent self-tapes, and I was like, I feel like Carolyn Bracken is the one to play the mother. And I remember the casting director was like, okay, but like, let's get them in to read with Hazel, just like pick a few people. And I was like, I feel like my gut says it's her though, I just know it. And then we got Carolyn in to just like do a kind of a few scenes with Hazel. And I remember when Carolyn walked out, and me and Hazel were like, yeah, it's her. Yeah. We were like, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So it just like was kind of a no-brainer.
That's fantastic. And like, I think great decision, great gut decision there. Hazel, we go to you first. You mentioned earlier, like, you loved the script when you got it. You're a horror fan, but like, what was your reaction to the character of Shar? Because as Kate mentioned there, it's a very wordless performance. There's a lot of like really kind of inside acting going on there, which I imagine is a challenge, but a very welcome one.
It was, yeah, for sure. I remember the first time I read the script, I was house sitting for somebody. I was on a job actually in the Hinch, and I was house sitting for somebody at the time, and it was dark all around. And it was this house in the middle of an estate that was kind of like a holiday home resort type place. So nobody was there. It was the middle of spring, and I was on my own, and it was just weird noises, and I had like my speaker playing horror movie soundtrack stuff. So it was very ambient, and I just, as soon as I'm pretty sure as soon as I finished reading the script, I immediately started reading it again. I just could see so many layers to it, and it's like the world was so rich in everything Kate was talking about. Like she had obviously researched and put so much thought into the folklore of this tale, and Shar was such a wordless character. She's got so much going on around her, and yet she's like she's kind of just standing in the middle of nowhere, just trying to hold on to something, but like everything around her is moving so quickly. And I felt like that was a character that I hadn't really gotten a chance to play before. And even though she doesn't say much, there was so much depth to her. I could feel it.
Yeah, you can certainly feel it watching as well with the character. There's loads of lovely little beats, like when she's talking to the teacher, I think played by Jade Jordan.
Yeah.
And like she says, "Oh, I like your painting," and like she's kind of trying to keep there, but there's a little smile kind of thing, or slight bit of pride, but also where's this going? It's terrific. Carolyn, as well for you, like people might know you from the likes of Smother and Dublin Murders and so forth, but this is like I think one of your first kind of major roles in a horror feature, certainly. And by all accounts, according to Kate as well, like your take seemed to be you were very committed to this role. What was it about it that attracted you in the first place?
Yeah, like with it being the first script that I was sent where I was being considered for a lead role, I felt as if I kind of hit the jackpot, really, to be honest with you, because I tore through it. The minute it was sent, I sat down and I didn't look up until it was finished. And I was envisaging, like I was visualizing in my head, how will they do this scene? This is going to be incredible. And how will they do that scene? And I could feel myself starting to get attached to the character of Angela very, very quickly. But you're as an actor, you have to keep fairly level-headed because like there's other very talented people in the running as well. So I remember just kind of keeping patient and practicing a little bit of restraint. But in terms of the script and the character and Shar as a character as well, and just that beautiful using the genre of horror to deliver the story of mental health via the metaphor of Celtic mythology, that was just, it just bounced off the page and I loved it. I got attached, but I had to kind of be very self-restrained. So, but I got lucky. So, yeah.
And we mentioned, or Kate mentioned earlier, that they brought the two of you in for a chemistry test as well. And the relationship in the film is fascinating because it's a little ambiguous, or maybe not ambiguous, maybe not over-explained of where the relationship is between them at the start of the film, or like, what exactly has gone on up to this point. But you get a full sense of a very real mother-daughter relationship from it. How was that chemistry read for you guys first starting off as kind of playing mother and daughter? Hazel?
Well, I remember Carolyn came into the room, and I think the first scene we might have had together was where she was sitting in the car. Both scenes were pretty eerie. She was sitting in the car, obviously not in a real car, but we were playing tennis. And she was just looking straight ahead. And in both of these scenes, I mean, she had given me such a warm welcome as she came in the room, but she just completely transformed into this character and completely transformed into Angela, who was like a very unsettling person at times. So yeah, the second scene we had together was a scene where she comes in and she's like talking to me, and I'm in my bed and she's trying to reassure me as a very scary person. And yeah, I could literally feel at that moment, I was like getting scared. I was like, she is the one. She's incredible.
And Carolyn, for you, how was that like first moment? Like you said, you're trying to be restrained going, into the process, but this role requires like a full kind of embodied commitment, I would say, lack of restraint almost.
Oh, listen, sure. You know, I knew Hazel. You know, I'd been down in Cork, I think the year or two beforehand, and saw her in Float Like a Butterfly, and God, I was absolutely in love with her as an actor. So getting to see her and meet her in person and actually run some scenes with her was just an absolute dream. And I think we were just lucky. We just got along really well straight away. You know, there was just that kind of chemistry that was naturally there. We were just very lucky. So yeah, but it was a great experience. Yeah, I remembered walking out of there just feeling really full. You know, felt great. Yeah.
And Kate, then after that, you were like, we have our Charter, we have our Angela. But there's a great cast around that as well, with I suppose Ingrid Craigie as Rita, and Peter Reid as the uncle character. How's the casting process for the rest of it?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of all started slotting in pretty quickly then, like once we kind of had Carolyn and Hazel like locked in. It was a shame at the time because obviously we were kind of in height of COVID, so there was no kind of meeting people for a coffee or that kind of thing. So it was a lot of self-tapes, which normally I don't really like because I feel like you don't really get to know, like meet somebody and like chat to them. But I organized like Zoom calls with Ingrid and Paul and stuff and Jordan. And, you know, that was kind of nice, just like get to know them and talk to them and see like what they were like as people, and, you know, actually get to do that. But yeah, it was a bit of a weird experience with COVID, but I think, yeah, like Ingrid is amazing, and Paul, like I think the self tapes just shine through, and you just felt like they were just, you know, giving so much, that it just was kind of, yeah, it all slotted in, and it made a lot of sense, kind of all the casting, just like, yeah, that works, and then yeah, they all kind of worked really well together. So it was pretty easy process actually.
And speaking of, you mentioned Jordan there, who plays Cher's eventual friend Suzanne. They've great chemistry as well, very believable. And I love that there's an arc to their friendship as well, that it starts off with Suzanne kind of bullying or being part of a group who bullies Cher a little bit, but then becoming like kind of kindred spirits. Did you do a chemistry test with Jordan and Hazel for that as well, or was it just like they'll be grand?
I don't think we did we? No. I think I just kind of knew they were both really great, and they were, I don't know, I knew they'd get along really well as people anyway. You know, they probably had a lot in common. And yeah, I think, and this first scene we shot the very first day was actually a scene with the two of them where Hazel's walking home from a pharmacy and Jordan sees her and then starts kind of like pestering her. And that was our very, very first day. And I think, yeah, right off the bat, like they were both just like getting on really well and like chatting all the time, like in between takes, and like, you know, it just was obvious they were yeah, I loved kind of any scenes we had with the two of them together, because they're kind of more a little bit lighthearted scenes usually, and like just having fun with them was like great crack. And with all the other kind of girls as well, like everyone was just kind of like having a great laugh on set those days, because they weren't as serious days, they were kind of more fun. Yeah.
And Hazel, for you, those kind of scenes, like you weren't too long out of school yourself, I imagine, when you're shooting these ones. Was it kind of difficult to get back in that mindset?
Yeah, yeah, it was funny just like graduating from school, well, not having a proper graduation, but like graduating and then getting back straight into a uniform. That was fun. But yeah, those scenes, I think there's one scene in a classroom, and then the rest of it, it's that feeling of being in school, but obviously you're not in school the whole time. I could obviously relate because I was like half a year out of school. It was a lot of fun to get to sort of finish out my school year, because I didn't really get to in school, via this movie. Kind of.
So as a surrogate kind of finishing of school.
Sort of, yeah.
That's good. And Carolyn, for you, I think one of the really brilliant things about your performance as Angela is that the film does an amazing thing where it's ambiguous as to the nature of what's going on with her, whether it is a supernatural thing or mental illness, or you know, something somewhere between those two worlds. And your performance is great at, like, it could be either the whole way through. Like, was it tricky balancing that with that in mind, or was it all on the page for you?
I think when I was creating the character of Angela, you know, you know, God, it was a complete collaboration with just listening to Kate, like listening to what she said in the script and listening to what she was, you know, our conversations about the character. And then, you know, for me, I just kind of went away and just slotted in a few bits of the puzzle and kind of, you know, when it comes to Angela, you know, she's just such a complex character. And for me, kind of the way I suppose, if you want to call it a process, you know, human behavior is on a spectrum and from good to bad and everything in between. And, you know, I can say with all honesty that I've probably in my own life experienced it all from good to bad. So I find parts of myself and I insert it in so that it can remain as honest as possible. And I did that, well, I tried to do that, and hopefully that's what will connect with an audience with the performance. But yeah, you know, in terms of, you know, the shift between Angela and, you know, Angela, it was a lot of fun. You know, I thrived in it, and just, you know, getting the resources from Kate as well, and just where her head was at, and just knowing how far I could take it, which was pretty far. So
Yes.
that was a lot of fun. That was great as well, just being able to nurture that and to, you know, establishing that love between, you know, Shar and Angela early on, even if it is somewhat disconnected, but that it's there, even if it can't be demonstrated, you know.
Very
yeah.
much so. Like, it really does come across very much so in the film, and it's interesting you say as well. I think it will definitely connect with audiences, because like I was horrified, but I wasn't quite sure why I was horrified, and it was just that kind of depth of emotion from Shar's fear, looking at her mother and worry for her, and then like what is exactly happening here, I don't know, but I'm scared of it. Terrifically realized. Deirdre and Kate, if we can just talk back a little bit now. We've got the brilliant cast assembled, and you went to shoot, and we're going to come to some of the rest of the team you had in a little bit. But I'm just curious, how long did you shoot for on the film? Deirdre, maybe.
Sure, yeah. We shot in October, November of 2020 under level 5 lockdown, and we shot for 5 weeks.
5, okay.
So
wow.
yeah. So it was originally kind of more looking at 4 weeks, and then because of COVID, just the impact of kind of having to slow down and allow a bit more time for managing set and all the different side of things and safety on set. So we ended up with 5 weeks.
I imagine you ended up with a lot shorter days because of all those kind of time constraints coming in around COVID and safety and so forth. Or like, was there any challenges around that, like you had to adapt to on the fly, or was it?
Yeah, there was a certain amount. I mean, I think, you know, shooting film is always a challenge, and there's no better people who can kind of adapt, and you can kind of throw things up in the air and come back down, hit reset, and off we go. We certainly, the way that our film worked is because a lot of it is shot in the interior of the house. So we split it so that we do all the exteriors the first 2 weeks and then move into the interiors the second 2.5 or thereabouts. So it was just a lot of, you know, being mindful, pod systems, you know, slow and steady, and just calm. And if we get anything that unexpected happens, you just go, it's fine, we're just making a film, you know, let's prioritize. Because for a lot of us, it was our first time filming since COVID. So we were all learning, you know, on what the best practice was. So we just went, well, say health and safety is an absolute priority. So
absolutely. And Kate, for you as well, like obviously done your short before, but the feature, and especially as your first feature, it's quite a challenge stepping up. But with that kind of COVID looming in the background, like, did it in any way kind of add to your, obviously it added to your, I suppose, stress and the whole thing, but did it in any way dent your enthusiasm for it, or was it like, this is going to be grand, we're going to get through it?
Yeah, well, I think like a couple of people have asked me that, and I'm like, well, I don't know what it's like to make a film not in COVID.
Yeah.
This is my first feature, so it kind of was just part of the day to day. Like, you went and you got your nose swabbed in the morning, and then you talked to the actors, and then that was kind of like, you know, you just kind of got on with it. So yeah, I don't think it majorly impacted. Like, I don't know how it would have been that different if we, you know, because we were just wearing our masks and, you know, same kind of way that, you would do everything, I imagine. Because yeah, we were in our pod, so like I was allowed to talk to the actors and kind of be close to them and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't impact that, and kind of that's the most important thing when you're in the middle of shooting, is just like the actors. So yeah, it was fine. There was the time we did get like a COVID scare where we thought we had a positive test, and we had to be locked in. We were filming in a school, and we had to be locked in a courtyard for like 3 hours because they were like, we can't let anyone leave until we get everyone tested again. So we were like sitting in like a school yard that was in like quad, so we like couldn't leave, and we were all just like sitting there for like 2 hours. It was really funny. So that was a unique experience, but apart from that, it was like perfectly fine. Yeah.
That sounds like nightmare fuel, trapped in a school quad for 2 hours in the middle of COVID.
Yeah.
There's a film to be shot. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the film, and those of you tuned in, you've probably seen this. You're more like your members who were able to watch it on the IFTA viewing platform. If you haven't, you might close your ears. I don't want to spoil too much, but there's an incredible scene which features the single best deployment of Joe Dolan I have ever come across in my life. It's a genuinely terrifying scene, and Shar comes in and Angela's playing a good-looking woman by Joe Dolan, and it's okay. And then Angela stamps her feet, and then just to say it escalates from there is a small thing. It's such a visually arresting scene. I'm just wondering, Kate, was that written on the page like that, and how do you even kind of come up with something like that? Which I know it ends up being a chase on all fours, but it's remarkably scary from the start.
Yeah, well, I think it was something. I think a lot of people can relate to. When you're kind of young and like say your parents get drunk and they're kind of like dancing around, and it's kind of scary, not scary, but like, it can.
This isn't normal.
Yeah, it kind of like to see your parents in a state of kind of like, losing themselves a bit, and they're not kind of in their normal, way of speaking to you or whatever, that, it can be very frightening. So I just pushed that like up about 100. But then the Joe Dolan aspect of it was actually, so basically our amazing composer Dee Hexon came on board of the project quite early and was doing a lot of kind of atmospheric music based on the script, and it was amazing. It just like helped the actors, I think, so much to be sent that and be like, this is kind of the vibe of the whole thing. And so she had done a track for that scene, which was this kind of, because I always kind of played like Lankum and stuff when I was writing the script, and so I always imagined kind of almost like a trad track being played on the vinyl went in that scene. So Dee Hexon did this really amazing track, and actually that was the track we played on set for Carolyn when we were filming. It was in the edit up until a certain point, and it was like unbelievable. It was so primal, and like I think for Carolyn it was like an amazing tool because just like really evoked all these kind of primal dance moves. But then what happened was we were in the edit, and the editor John Cutler and me were working on the edit over Christmas, and we had just gotten to that point in the film just before Christmas, and basically as a Christmas card to Dee to be like, here's where we are in the edit, like we just did the dance scene, like have a look. We were like, oh, well, we send her as a joke with Mariah Carey's All I Want for Christmas Is You underneath it instead. So John like put the track underneath the scene, and then we sent it to Dee, and Dee was like, haha, this is crazy, lol. And then me and John were like watching it, and we were actually like, oh, this is actually more disturbing somehow. And I think it was like the upbeat music with a mother behaving really erratically actually was more disturbing than having a kind of a very primal trad track. So then we just were like, okay, we can't afford Mariah Carey probably. So what we'll do is we'll just have a think about what, because I was thinking then, I was like, what tracks would Granny, Ingrid's character Rita, the granny, have on vinyl in her house? And I was thinking my granny's vinyls, and like then we just were like tried Joe Dolan, a few different Joe Dolan tracks, and I was like, okay, Good Looking Woman is the one, Dee. So you had to like figure out how to like get the rights to Joe Dolan, which she did. So we did it. But yeah, no, it was very much on the page in terms of what happens in the scene. But I think like it was funny because Carolyn, I was like messaging Carolyn all the time. I was like, sent her the track, and I was like, send me a video of anything you're working on. And Carolyn was like, I will, but I just have my sons here and I don't want to do it in front of them because I'm afraid I'm going to scare them. And I was like, okay, that sounds good though. So once we had the house location, which was about 2 weeks before we were shooting maybe or something like that, we went to the house location and I brought Hazel and Carolyn there. And we just played the track, and Carolyn kind of just showed us some crazy moves she was trying, and we kind of played out the scene there a couple of times just to get the geography of the room to feel it out a bit. And yes, then it all kind of came together that way. So that's all the kind of different aspects of how that scene happened.
Carolyn and Hazel will come to you on that now. It's just a terrific scene, and as Kate was saying, Carolyn, like that performance in there, like I can imagine it would have scared your children. It's full-bodied and committed, to say the least. How was it shooting that?
It was probably one of my favorite life events of all time, to be honest with you. I loved it. You know, how often does an actor get to just do something like that? Do you know what I mean? And when I saw it realized in Toronto, where it was premiered there last year, I really saw it from Kate's point of view as the writer, and from Char's point of view, just how frightening it is. I think in the moment when I was prepping for it and things like that, I think I was just more concentrated on getting what needed to be done out there. But on the night itself, there was something, for me, there was just something, a really kind of a magical, creepy energy in the air. And I think it was contributed by Dee Hexon's number that was resonating throughout the house as we were doing those scenes. And it was just incredible. And myself and Hazel, you know, just, and Kate, while we were prepping for it, like we were, you know, there was a trust there, and we were able to, because it does get very, very physical, and you know, just open communication and just figuring out what we can get away with. And then just having the freedom to just go, it was incredible. I remember driving home, we shot on a Friday night, we wrapped for the weekend. And I remember driving home feeling the calmest I'd felt in years.
That's fantastic. And for the legacy of that lovely calm moment to be terrifying people for years to come, I think it's fantastic. Hazel, for you as well, just on that, like you're brilliant in that scene, because eventually when Angela starts chasing on all fours, like it's incredibly frightening. And Char is like, it's a brilliant kind of almost like instinctive reaction of terror to that. Like how do you kind of get into that moment, the character, or was it easy? Were you genuinely afraid of Carolyn?
Well, harking back to what Kate said about like seeing your parents drunk, I'd kind of never really seen my parents drunk. They were always taking it easy around the kids, but I could imagine like exactly what that would be like, and how much of an outer body experience it becomes, and how much of a struggle it becomes to stay in your body and experience that, experience your mother or your parents just kind of going off the rails a little bit, and pushing your boundaries that you'd set up as a family. And then it wasn't difficult at all, because Carolyn was like this incredible force of nature that was just like flailing around that room. It was unbelievable to watch, and sometimes I was a little bit like outside myself because of how in awe I was of Carolyn in the scene. So the only struggle there was actually remaining like in a scene and not just being like, whoa.
I can imagine. You talked a lot about the house there, I suppose, as well, and the geography of that. I think there's an incredible aesthetic to the film. Like there's a great kind of color scheme to the house. It does feel like your granny's house, you know, the bridges crossing the door and stuff. I thought it was fantastic. But there's some of the lighting, and then the use of the red light when there is a scary moment, and just the general costuming, hair, everything with that. Like you had an amazing team there, like from your DOP. I can never pronounce it properly, Narian Van Mela. And Madonna Bambino was on makeup. Gwen Harry's, who really think the costume, and Lauren Kelly was production designer. I think like them and all their teams, and many more, I'm sure, like really created this perfectly unified, I think, tone that works really well, let alone with the practical effects, which I'll come to. But maybe Deirdre and Kate, you could just talk a little bit about assembling that team and like how they all gelled on set.
Yeah, sure. So Keisha was kind of keen to work with Narian quite early on. So we met him kind of and talked through the project with him. I think he was probably one of the first HODs to come on board. Super talented, his shorts are fantastic. And we knew that he was kind of, he'd be up for the challenge, and he'd kind of bring this kind of unique feel to the film. And as also within, just to go back to the POV scheme very quickly, it's also a training and mentorship scheme. So it's also about bringing on a team that, or maybe this is their debut film, or maybe just their second one. So they're also challenging their own level of skill at that time. So we had Narian, absolutely thrilled to be working with, and did a marvelous job. We had Lauren Kelly, was amazing. Lauren Kelly is, I hope she doesn't mind me saying, a 22-year-old just out of college. And she came on board with, you know, energy and a can-do attitude, and did such an amazing job under a very challenging, they had a few challenges in that department, and she kind of just, you know, got into it and got on with it. So we were really amazed by what she delivered upon, you know, because that house is a house from in Clontarf. It's very nice. It's much bigger than what the house looks like, you know, because we wanted to shoot in a slightly wider space to allow for camera angles and also for COVID. So she did an incredible job kind of designing that and getting the house has such a strong personality within the film. It is kind of a character and a claustrophobia element to it. And then we've, as we've mentioned, the marvelous Dee Hexon doing the music. Madonna Bambino did an amazing job with the makeup, and kind of working with Kate and Carolyn to design her look as she takes on her alternative character, and Gwen as well, and an incredible job on all the costumes. So I'm sure I'm forgetting a few people, but they did a tremendous, absolutely tremendous job.
Yeah, it was really amazing as well, like just to have so many gorgeous girls just like on set all the time. It was like a very, like, you know, Lauren, obviously, like amazing team of just like young women in the art department as well, like a lot of them. And it was just like really nice to have that kind of energy on set, just like so many cool female HODs like taking, like, you know, such I don't know, just giving so much to the film, and like such a strong female cast as well. Not to play down Narian and like John Cutler and Dean and all the amazing men as well. But yeah, that was just very cool. And like, yeah, I think because it was like a lot of people's first features, and or, you know, maybe the first kind of their first HOD feature role kind of for some people, it just meant that I think there was a real like hunger and desire to like do something really strong, and like, you know, nobody was kind of doing anything by halves, and really were putting like so much of themselves into it, and like, you know, just doing an amazing job. Like Drew Maitland as well, first AD, like he just made like such ambitious set pieces that we had to film, and just made it so easy to do that, and was just like so brilliant with all the actors, and just like making the set feel really safe and comfortable for everybody. So yeah, it was just like an amazing team. I felt like there was just like so many talented people. I was like, this is great. Makes my job a lot easier when there's like so many great people doing such good jobs, you know, that you don't even need to think about it. And then you're just kind of like, I get to just work with the actors, and I, you know, they're just doing an amazing job. So you're like, perfect. No worries.
The way it should work. I want to talk about the ending of the film in a second. So spoiler warning for anyone who may not have seen it. But you mentioned John Cutler there, your editor, and there's one sequence in particular I was fascinated by coming up to the ending, where Angela comes out of the house and screams, but we don't hear her scream, but we hear and see the firework behind her instead. And it's really, really cool. I was wondering, was that always written as such, or was that something that came up in the edit? Or because it just like is one of those moments where you just go, that was cool.
It was so it wasn't in the script. I know the fireworks element of like the Halloween night were really important to me, because like I think growing up in Dublin, like just the din of fireworks on Halloween night is so oppressive. But like,
or the entire month leading up to Halloween.
Yeah, like from, you know, the end of September. yeah, but it was just like, you know, such a part of like a Dublin Halloween. So I wanted the fireworks to be such an integral part. And we were filming that shot of Carolyn when she sees Hazel across the road, and we had a certain angle, and I was like, we got that, but then I was like, could we get one low, and then maybe just I could put a firework in the background in the sky behind Carolyn, or something like that. So Marion kind of took a lower angle on set. Then in the edit, John is kind of a super whiz when it comes to, you know, trickery and camera trickery and all that kind of stuff in post-production as well. So he did a lot of kind of small effects himself. So he kind of added a layer to the shot, so it felt like it was a tilt up, but it wasn't really on the day. So then we could kind of fill the whole sky with fireworks at that point. So it was kind of a mixture of like a decision to make on set on the day, but then also just like amplifying that, like John just kind of, I was like, this is what I kind of wanted to do, but it's harder to do. And he was like, I'll figure out a way to do it. He's like kind of a superstar in that respect. I'd just be like, it'd be cool if that was more like this. And he'd be like, I can kind of make it look more like that. And I'd be like, oh, perfect. This is great.
Carry on.
Yeah.
That's fab, and it leads up to like a really genuinely terrifying ending. Like you built up the Halloween thing from the very start with like the girls with the pallets. It kind of starts with a fire, and it builds up to like what seems to be an inevitable Dublin urban Wicker Man scenario, be it on a more modest scale, but it just feels like inevitable by the time you get to the end of it. And it's quite a scary scene, like where again, spoilers folks at home if you haven't seen it, but most of you haven't logged off, so no one has, so it seems like you're on board for this. But there's a bit where Angela kind of contorts her way into it when Char is stuck inside the pyre or the bonfire, and it's really, really terrifying. But I suppose that bonfires are quite common as well, as you said, in Ireland, Halloween and stuff. How did you kind of work the shooting of that scene? Like, I suppose, because it is genuinely terrifying.
Yeah, well, the actual kind of practicalities of it, because I obviously, you know, the bonfire is such a, you know, iconic piece of like a Dublin Halloween as well. Like they're kind of all over the estates, like where I would have grown up, like going to them as a teenager and stuff like that. And I was just like, wanted to do it. And I was like, you know, we in pre-production, I'd be like, you know, we with Dee and like Lauren and the effects guys, and I'd be like, no, it needs to be at least this tall because they need two people standing inside. And I was doing all these like diagrams and like all this kind of stuff, and then I could see everyone being like, how the hell are we gonna have like a 12-foot bonfire? But somehow, yeah, it's basically what they did was Lauren's team built a kind of a 3/4 of the way around bonfire structure, so it had like one side missing so that we could kind of get in and film easily. And then we just had a piece that kind of slotted onto that for any shots kind of inside once it was done. But yeah, it was kind of simplistic enough when we actually figured it all out. But it was kind of, for a while, it was kind of like, Dee was like, any way this could be something easier and not a bonfire? I was like, no, unfortunately not. It has to be a bonfire.
Yeah, it was a combination, wasn't it, of Lauren, and we brought on an SFX team, obviously, because then one must light a bonfire. So we need to plan that as well. So the team kind of did an incredible job, because we were originally thinking, oh, maybe it should be 6 foot, but then you're like, but if people have to stand inside it, then it needs to be 6 foot here, but actually the center of it needs to be 12 foot. And then suddenly it's getting, you know,
it's like it sounds like logistically intricate to get to that point, but then like it looks fantastic. And shooting it, Hazel and Carolyn, because Carolyn, you're in quite a lot of makeup at this point, and you're one of your more terrifying kind of moments in the film, and it's quite claustrophobic, I imagine. So Hazel and Carolyn, maybe Hazel first, how was that scene to shoot?
I think that was the day of my birthday, I believe. So that was a nice little addition to the fun and horror that was going on.
That's great. Did you do anything nice for your birthday? Yeah, I was inside a giant bonfire.
Being scared to death by a monster. Yeah, and I remember just the feeling when Carolyn came out and she was in all her makeup, and I hadn't seen her up until that point in that whole getup. And it was genuinely skin crawling. Like Madonna Bambino did such a number. Like, what an incredible makeup artist to have on that shoot. Everything just looked like her whole, you could see how her body was deteriorating, and yeah, very creepy. I always find that scenes where you're meant to have some kind of shock or like scare vibe in it, are like quite difficult. But yeah, not really here again for the same reason.
And Carolyn, for you, obviously, like it's a great physical performance, creepy as well. We had quite a lot of that wonderful Madonna Bambino makeup on you as well. Is it difficult to act in that, or does it kind of help you kind of feel more other, I suppose?
Do you know what? When the cameras weren't rolling, I'd forget that it would be there, and then people would be looking at me going, horrified, you know. People would be responding to me differently, but no, once the cameras were rolling, you know, you know, you could see when you'd look down, you'd see the deterioration and everything. But you know, that's when you have the, you know, the beauty of acting across from someone. You could see it within Hazel, that it was extremely creepy, you know, how I looked, and that fed, you know, my performance. But no, it was great. I remember it being, like, I'd say it was such a stressful thing for the production to shoot, but you know, they didn't let us know, you know. It seemed to be seamless as far as we were concerned. We were just the actors who came in and went, and then just walked away. You know, like, it was just such a huge production, you know. I such an ambitious thing, and I think it was done maybe the first week. Was it the first week or the second week of shooting? You know, it was a big day for everyone. So yeah, it was just amazing seeing it pulled off. It was great.
Fab. We've got a few questions coming in from there, people, and I'm going to get to those in a moment, but I just want to talk about when he showed the film in Toronto as part of the Midnight Madness, which is terrific. Like, and I can imagine being a perfect film for that crowd. Obviously during COVID, but so there was like, it's like, you know, crowd was managed and stuff, but it must have been brilliant to get it out in front of like a live audience at a kind of horror slot in such a significant festival. Kate, how was that for you? Obviously it was kind of late in the evening.
Yeah.
After a long day waiting. But
yeah, I think it's like, because, you know, obviously I had only watched the film predominantly on John Cutler's television in his house with him. So we hadn't really even had a screening that had more than 3 people. We like watched it with Dee and a couple, kind of someone from Screen Ireland just before we left to kind of check the DCP in the Lighthouse. But like, it was the very first time to see it with actual kind of like an audience at TIFF at Midnight Madness. So yeah, I was absolutely bricking it, and the whole day. And when it's at midnight, that is like bricking it for like from 9 a.m. till 12 midnight. So you're just like trying to keep it together and like sweating. And yeah, and we also had loads of press that day. We had to do loads of press, and we were like, the 3 of us were kind of like in all these press interviews being like, what is going on? I'm having an out of body experience. So that was kind of a bit weird, but yeah, no, it was obviously amazing. And like the Midnight Madness, I thoroughly enjoyed. Like when I went to the other screenings in Midnight Madness, like the audience is so excited, and you know, Peter Kaplowski, who programs it, is such a character and so fun and makes you feel so welcome. So that was just like, and getting to go after all COVID times was just amazing. But yeah, I think the actual screening itself, I kind of like had a blackout. I'm like, I don't remember what happened, because I was just, not because I was drunk, but just because I was like stressed. But no, it was great. It was such a great experience. The festival's amazing, and like it was so nice that we all got to go and have fun. And you know, Toronto was so cool as well. It was fabulous.
It's a very good festival. Great place as well. Hazel and Carolyn, how was it for you at TIFF at the screening?
It was surreal, you know what I mean? It's a bizarre experience. It was the first time I'd ever been over at a international film festival and things like that. So I remember Hazel and I were sitting together, and then, you know, the opening scene, and I remember just kind of grabbing her hand, and we just kept holding hands basically. And I think it was decently into the second, like the open was finished by the time we kind of looked at each other and went, like, we can drop our hands now. We're good. But yeah, it was surreal. But it was beautiful to see a realized, like the script that, you know, initially just landed in your inbox that you read, and seeing it realized on screen, and just seeing the hard work of just everybody. It was incredible, and seeing it, being able to see it properly through Shara's eyes as well, and via, you know, obviously from Kate's eye, you know, it was just it was incredible. It was surreal, yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I know it's, I don't know if the date's been announced yet, but I know it's going to be playing as part of Dublin International Film Festival as well. So I think Irish audience will really get it, especially horror fans. But I think most people will get a really good thrill out of watching this terrific film. We just have time for a few questions from people here now. So one is from Rob Walsh, and he's got two. So he's got one for Kate and one for Hazel. So Kate, he says, the film has a feel of some of the great horror films of the 70s. Did you have any particular influences?
Yeah, I mean, like, I feel like there was a lot of you know, a lot of great folk horror is from the 70s, so like that was obviously an influence. I find like the aesthetic, the color of, you know, films from then, you know, even like one film I often use as reference, because the film is very much from Shara's perspective, so you're very much in her POV all the time. So Rosemary's Baby was the one that I kind of referenced to Hazel when we were prepping, and just kind of, yeah, and then any kind of the references I was sending to Lauren, because it is so much set in Granny's house, like a lot of it as well, like you have to kind of, like my Granny's house had so much kind of patterned carpet, and, you know, nothing had changed since like 1950, and all the furniture and stuff. So that was like a part of it too. Just that it felt like authentically that place. And the color palette, just that the color palette was kind of chosen based on elemental aspects, because there's this idea of like the earth and the wet, and being opposed to like the fire and the air. And we used a lot of kind of earthy references for some scenes, and then more kind of water like colors and references for other scenes, that me and Lauren kind of worked up together. So that was a big part of the aesthetic. But yeah, definitely there's like a lot of 70s references in there. A lot of like, you know, one movie that I felt like was a good reference as well was Candyman, you know, the 1992 one, because, you know, growing up, I was very much from an urban atmosphere, like, but I had a grandmother who grew up in the tenements who was the most superstitious person I ever met in my whole life, and said she was a witch, and that she would put a widow's curse on anyone who wronged us and all this kind of stuff. So like, but she grew up very much in the city, never set foot in the countryside, hated it. So, you know, if I felt like urban folk horror hadn't really been seen as much in the Irish landscape, and Candyman then was like a reference that I would go back to a lot as well, as a kind of a different folk horror kind of setting, I suppose. But yeah, hope that answers the question. I don't know.
Absolutely, it does. One more here as well from Eamon Quinlan. He says, great to see Irish films looking at Irish folklore for their inspiration, from The Changeling and Hole in the Ground, and here The Overtook in Boys in County Hell, and various things in Wolfwalkers and Cartoon Saloons work that are less terrifying. How do we feel about, do we think Irish films should look more at these kind of folklore elements and stuff? Deirdre, maybe Fantastic Films could do like an Avengers style universe with all the different Irish mythological characters and kind of horror universe. I'll have a pitch on your desk on Monday.
Let's steal that idea immediately. Yeah, look, I mean, often kind of you can't help but kind of feel, is there an anthology idea or something here? I mean, we've such a rich storytelling within this space that is unique to Ireland, and such an incredible landscape that can really kind of complement it. So yeah, look, folklore is, it's a great place to be exploring things, and very unique, and feels very intriguing, I think, and exotic to international cast or international audiences.
Fantastic. Well, guys, I think I've kind of just slightly gone over time there, and thank you all for putting in your questions there. Sorry we didn't get to them all, but I think a lot of them were answered through the discussion. But before we go, you're obviously playing in Dublin, so people should keep an eye out for that. But we're hoping to have news on theatrical release at some point, I believe, soon. I don't know if you can say when, but I think it's coming. Watch this space.
Watch this space.
Excellent. Well, do let us know, guys.
You won't have to wait till Halloween anyway.
You won't have to wait too long.
Excellent. Excellent news. Well, do keep us informed, guys. We'd be happy to let people know as well. Guys, thank you all so much for your time, and thank you for tuning in as well and asking your questions. tomorrow we'll be back again, and we're going to have 2 more of these. We'll be talking to Andrew Baird, the director of Zone 4 and 4, along with Owen Fiore, one of the actors in that. And then in the afternoon, IFTA CEO Ona Moriarty will be talking with the team behind Who We Love, which is directed by Graham Cantwell and written directed by Katie McNeese and Graham as well. And we've got a lot of the cast and sound people and composers for that as well, so it'll be great. So please do keep an eye on IFTA.ie. But for now, thank you so much to Kate, Deirdre, Hazel and Carolyn, and congrats on a genuinely terrifying and really, really great horror film, and can't wait to see what you all do next.